Coming up on Arirang News. Growing the biohealth sector into one of South Korea's next mainstay industries. With this, President Yoon pledges to create a Korean version of the Boston biotech cluster. The latest findings show a wider income gap between employees at conglomerates and small and medium-sized enterprises in South Korea. Also, a stark wage gap between male and female workers remains. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the fighting in the city of Bakhmut is getting extremely tense. This follows U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's warning to China of severe consequences for helping Russia during her visit to Kyiv. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in South Korea. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. South Korea is aiming to become one of the world's top biohealth innovators, with President Yoon outlining his vision to turn the sector into a future cash cow for the country. Our presidential correspondent Oh Soo-young leads us off.
South Korea's top office is betting on biohealth as one of the country's leading industries, aiming to rank among the world's 6 largest biohealth exporters within the next 5 years. President Yoon on Tuesday held a strategy meeting on creating a biohealth export market, gathering related government ministers, health tech firms, academia and medical associations. Stressing the growth potential of the world's $1.9 trillion biohealth market, the president said the sector would not only provide quality healthcare services based on cutting-edge technologies, but also provide a shot in the arm for the economy, with newly created jobs for young South Koreans.
먼저 과감한 혁신과 투자가 뒤따라야 합니다. 의료, 건강, 돌봄 서비스를 디지털 기반으로 전환해서 글로벌 시장을 선점할 수 있도록 집중 투자해야 할 것입니다.
Highlighting the medical innovation hub of Boston, Yoon called for public-private cooperation to create an ecosystem that supports innovation. To this end, the government outlined 5 policy directions. The first, fostering innovation in customized health and medical services with the use of personal data, and boosting exports by developing 2 new blockbuster drugs and doubling the volume of medical devices sold overseas to $16 billion. The plan also includes research and development of diverse technologies and solutions using artificial intelligence, supporting professionals and entrepreneurs with new educational programs, as well as building up solid legal and institutional frameworks. In this regard, President Yoon underscored the need for a speedy update of the country's laws on data protection in the form of the digital healthcare legislation currently sitting in Parliament. This, he says, is critical as the secure and effective use of personal data is vital to the growth of the biohealth industry. Seoul plans to unveil its 3rd comprehensive plan on growing the bio and pharmaceutical sector in March. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
South Korea held its first UAE Investment Cooperation Committee meeting to promote the mega investment pledge made last month by the United Arab Emirates. The committee aims to flesh out details of the UAE's $30 billion investment project. In an economy-related meeting today, Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho said the committee will work to create win-win opportunities for both countries. The UAE will make investments across various areas of strategic cooperation between the 2 countries, including in nuclear power, defense, hydrogen, and solar power. Ministry officials plan to visit the UAE in March to discuss details of the investment and are looking to holding conferences and business meetings by inviting officials from the UAE around May or June. Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo have held their first three-way dialogue on economic security, focusing on ways to cooperate on supply chains and emerging technologies. South Korea's Presidential Secretary for Economic Security, Wang Yoon met with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts in Honolulu Monday after the leaders of the three countries agreed to launch the dialogue channel in their summit last November. The three officials discussed various measures to foster cooperation in emerging and core sectors, including quantum, bio, and space technologies. They also focused on stabilizing supply chains for memory chips, batteries, and core minerals, along with countermeasures against moves that weaponize economic interdependence. South Korea and the U.S. held talks to discuss such issues last year, but decided to expand the dialogue to include Japan as a way to bolster trilateral relations. Recent findings show the average monthly wage of workers in South Korea rose slightly in 2021, but the growth was mostly driven by salary increases seen in large conglomerates. Meanwhile, the wage gap between male and female employees remained evident. Our Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
Average monthly wages have been rising in South Korea, but the income gap between workers at large companies and small and medium-sized enterprises has gotten wider. Data from Statistics Korea show that in 2021, the average monthly wage of office workers at companies of all sizes rose to 3.33 million won, up 4.1% from the year before. At the average rate that year, that's about $2,900 US. The average for workers at large conglomerates was 5.63 million won, up 6.6%. For employees at SMEs, however, it was 2.66 million, a rise of only 2.9%. Wage growth was the highest on record at large conglomerates and the lowest on record at SMEs. It's also the first time on record that the rate of income growth at large conglomerates was higher than at SMEs. By industry, the highest average income was in the financial sector at almost 7.26 million won. At the average rate that year, that's about $6,400. The lowest average income was in the hospitality sector, such as lodging and restaurants, at 1.62 million. There also remained a substantial wage gap between men and women. Men made on average 1.5 times that earned by women. Men made nearly 3.8 million won a month, up 4.7% from a year earlier, while women made 2.56 million and saw a gain of 3.7%. The gender wage gap is widely expected to continue.
There are a lot of instances where women leave the workforce, so it's not only important for women to get employed in the first place, but to continue working.
The expert added that in order for the gender wage gap to close, companies need to focus on keeping women in the workforce. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea's national tax revenue last month saw the largest on-year decline ever recorded for the month of January. The Ministry of Economy and Finance reported on Tuesday that the national tax revenue for January amounted to roughly $32 billion. This is a fall of around $5 billion compared to a year earlier. Also, when compared to the budget for this year, the amount of tax revenue collected accounts for only 10.7% of it, which is the lowest in 18 years. The ministry attributed this mainly to the drop in property taxes due to the decrease in transactions in the real estate market and on the stock exchange. As part of efforts to resolve the compensation issue for Koreans subjected to forced labor by Japan during World War II, South Korea's Foreign Minister Park Jin today met with the families of the victims. Right afterward, he told reporters that he listened to what they had to say carefully and added that the government will quickly work on finding a solution that's desirable. Last month, the South Korean government laid out a proposal to compensate the Korean victims through a public foundation instead of the Japanese firms accused. But this sparked controversy as victims and supporting civic groups protested that the issue cannot be resolved without a sincere apology from the Japanese firms accused. In what's seen as a rare party meeting, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un orders for a fundamental change in the regime's agriculture sector. This comes as recent reports suggesting that the North is facing serious food shortages, causing people to die from starvation. Choi Min-jung has the details.
Kim Jong-un has called for radical change in North Korea's agricultural production within the next few years, amid growing concerns over alleged food shortages. Speaking at a key party meeting on Monday, the state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Tuesday that Kim stressed the importance of laying the foundation for the stable and sustained development of agriculture, as well as achieving grain production targets. Kim's remark comes days after South Korea's unification ministry noted that the North appears to be facing a grave food crisis, along with reports of deaths caused by starvation. The ministry said the food shortage is likely to have been caused by a decline in food production. Data from Statistics Korea shows that the amount of land used for rice cultivation in North Korea declined 0.8% on-year in 2022, only 3/4 of the land used in South Korea. Statistics Korea says the drop is likely due to poor weather conditions as well as COVID-19 affecting farming personnel. And to cope with the crisis, according to the World Food Program, North Korea needs an additional $13 million until July. Currently, $42 million have been set aside to support North Korea. The WFP said it plans to resume support for children, pregnant women, and the sick once North Korea decides to open its borders. Officials from the organization reportedly left Pyongyang when COVID-19 broke out in March 2020. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
South Korean military authorities and their U.S. counterparts have made significant advances in bolstering their deterrence amid escalating North Korean nuclear and missile threats. This is according to Seoul's ambassador at Washington, D.C., following the allies' tabletop exercise last week. Lee Dae-yeon with more.
The South Korean ambassador to the U.S. Cho Tae-yong on Monday said that Seoul and Washington made practical progress in strengthening extended deterrence, referring to the U.S. using the full range of its military capabilities, including nuclear weapons. Following the 8th Deterrence Security Committee tabletop exercise last week in Washington, which mainly focused on the response to any potential use of nuclear weapons by North Korea, Cho said the two countries will seek to hold follow-up exercises in the very near future. Highlighting that Seoul's top officials will put more effort into making the North return to dialogue, Cho also mentioned that the North's provocations would only result in international sanctions and further isolation of the North from the global community. Meanwhile, the U.S. Undersecretary of State for International Security and Arms Control Bonnie Jenkins also mentioned North Korea's missile launches during the United Nations Disarmament Conference held in Geneva on Monday. She said the string of ballistic missile launches and recent nuclear test preparations by the North cannot be disregarded by international society. On top of that, the U.S. also underscored it has no hostile intent toward the North after Pyongyang warned that Washington's provocations against the regime will be considered a declaration of war. U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said Monday that multiple tests of ICBM, ballistic missiles, and other provocative activities by the North have posed a threat to peace and security in the Indo-Pacific. He also reaffirmed Washington's continued commitment to finding diplomatic solutions, saying there is still an opportunity for Pyongyang to engage in talks. Lee Dae-yeon, Arirang News.
The South Korean Air Force's Black Eagles aerobatic flight team soared across the southeastern Australian skyline on Tuesday. The team of South Korean T-50B supersonic jets marked its first ever air performance in the Southern Hemisphere, performing at the opening ceremony of the Australian International Airshow and Aerospace and Defense Exposition at Avalon Airport in Victoria. The team flew over 10,000 kilometers, stopping at Taiwan, the Philippines, and Indonesia to attend this major international air show. The Air Force deployed 120 personnel, including 11 pilots, 9 T-50B jets, and more for the show. The Air Force Chief of Staff General Jung Sang-hwa was also there to promote the T-50 aircraft manufactured in Korea. Starting Wednesday, South Korea is loosening quarantine restrictions for people arriving from China, Hong Kong, and Macau. PCR tests upon arrival will no longer be required. But until March 10th, passengers must continue to take PCR tests before departure and submit necessary quarantine information. Another change is that flights can arrive at other airports in Korea and not just Incheon International. Previously, all had to land at Incheon. The number of flights arriving from those countries will be increased to 100 per week, sometimes in March from the current 62 per week. The changes come 2 months after the restrictions were strengthened in January. Over in Ukraine, President Zelensky says the situation in the city of Bakhmut on the eastern front lines is getting increasingly tense as Russian forces are trying to take over. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, meanwhile, reaffirmed U.S. support for the war-torn nation during her visit to Kyiv. Yi Si-hoo has more.
In Ukraine, Russian forces are trying to encircle the city of Bakhmut in the Donetsk region, the focal point of Russia's advances in eastern Ukraine. Russia has been trying to take over the city for over half a year. According to reports by Reuters, this comes as rain and an early spring thaw turned eastern Ukraine's battlefields to mud in which military vehicles are getting stuck. President Zelensky, in his nightly address on Monday, said that the situation in Bakhmut is becoming increasingly difficult.
The enemy is constantly destroying everything that can be used to protect our positions for fortification and defense.
Also on Monday, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen made an unannounced trip to Kyiv and reaffirmed support for Ukraine.
As we mark 1 year since the beginning of this full-scale invasion, the message I bring you from President Biden is simple. America will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes.
Yellen met with President Zelensky, Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, and other key government officials. Shmyhal said that the two discussed further U.S. sanctions on Russia. Yellen announced the transfer of the $1.25 billion from the latest $9.9 billion tranche of economic and budget assistance from Washington. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said that Moscow is disappointed by South Korea's decision to expand sanctions against Russia. That's according to TASS, Russian news agency, which reported Zakharova's commentary published on Monday. South Korean government last week expanded the list of products that are subjected to exports control before being shipped to Russia in a move joining other countries like the United States and those in Europe as they agree on more packages of sanctions. Yi Si-hoo, Arirang News.
On the cultural front, a rare collection of precious white porcelain dating back to the Joseon dynasty is being showcased at a local museum here in Seoul, and our Kim Jong-sil offers us a glimpse.
Joseon Baekja, white porcelain made during the Joseon dynasty, fills this black room. With the lights showing just the individual vessels, they look like stars in a night sky.
A jaw-dropping collection of 31 porcelain vessels, more than half of all the Joseon dynasty porcelain designated as treasures or national treasures, is under one roof here at the Leo Museum.
Those porcelain items were made from the end of the 14th century here in Korea. Joseon Baekja is extremely difficult to make, and the material to make the color cost as much as gold, so when they were first made, only the king and members of the royal family were able to possess them.
Korean white porcelain from the Joseon dynasty has a harmonious appearance and essence, unlike the fancier vases of other countries. I hope visitors can discover the virtue and value that people during the Joseon dynasty were aiming for.
The exhibition consists of 4 categories. The first section includes this unprecedented collection of porcelain vessels made for king and the royal family, a pinnacle of Joseon white porcelain production. The second section introduces more colorful vessels that became bigger and had unique designs. The third section consists of items from the period of hardship during the invasion from neighboring countries such as Japan and China. During those times, the ingredients to make the blue color weren't easy to import, so porcelain makers in Joseon used iron instead, giving the designs a brown color. Finishing off the collection is the section of pure white porcelain. The exhibition of these prestigious items, which represent the peak of Joseon Baekja, runs until May 28th. The exhibition is free of charge, but visitors must book their spots online 2 weeks in advance. 김정실, Arirang News.
Following the easing of social distancing rules, musicals are resuming their international tours. This means that overseas casts are making their way back to South Korea to meet musical fans. Out of them, our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin went to meet one musical actor who's making much-needed, meaningful changes to the industry.
Yeah, my name is Joanna Ampil, and I'm a theater performer.
For the past 30 years, Joanna has been in numerous musicals worldwide, including Miss Saigon, The Sound of Music, and Rent. The West End star is from the Philippines and is currently performing in South Korea as part of the cast for Cats the Musical. After premiering in 1981, Cats has become one of the most beloved musicals of all time, sweeping trophies at the prestigious Tony and Grammy Awards. And although Joanna has been in the industry for decades, she says she's still in love with her job.
I think it's such a privilege, first of all, to be able to represent different characters. And being in theater is such a powerful platform. And also, you give the audience the opportunity to celebrate different emotions.
Joanna has been playing her dream role, Grisabella in Cats, for 10 years. She describes being able to sing the hit number Memory every night as an honor. But her road to success was not always easy.
I have auditioned for roles and not gotten it because I'm a person of color, but at the same time, I've also gotten roles because of my background, because I can offer something fresh and something different. I think that if a person can deliver and the goods and they can perform the role to the best of their abilities, then that person should play the role.
She says she's happy that there's a lot more diversity in the theater nowadays. Joanna Ampil is one of the pioneers of this meaningful change. She was the first Asian to portray Fantine in Les Miserables in the West End back in 2003. After Cats, she's going back to the UK to take part in Miss Saigon. Originally, she played the main character Kim, but this time, Joanna will make even more history by becoming the first female actor to play the role of engineer. As for what kind of actor she ultimately wants to be, her answer is
someone who just perhaps moved them in some way with the performance, and someone who can represent.
Cats can be seen at the Sejong Grand Theater until March 12th in Central Seoul. Tickets can be purchased online. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
The forecast calls for another mild day here in South Korea. Tomorrow, which is a National Independence Movement Day, partly cloudy skies will prevail for Seoul. For parts of Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do province, a bit of unsettled weather conditions with a mix of rain or snowfall is in store. As for the air quality, dust concentrations will soar nationwide, so make sure to have a mask that can filter out the dust particles. Conditions are forecast to remain dry for much of inland regions. Dry weather alerts are currently in place for much of South Korea, including here in Seoul. And for coastlines of Gangwon-do province, gusty offshore winds are in the forecast as well. The risk of wildfires will remain high, so please continue to take extra precautions. Tomorrow, Seoul and Daejeon will be starting off at 4 degrees Celsius. Daily highs in Seoul will get up to 10 degrees, Gwangju 11, Gyeongju and Busan will be warm at 13 degrees. On Thursday, conditions will temporarily get cold with lows in the minus range. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all for today's newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with the most up-to-date news tomorrow. Good night.